Welcome back to the Run Through Trails podcast, everyone. I'm James Tilley, your regular host, and I'm joined by my wonderful co-host, Lewis Moses. Lewis, how are you, mate?
I'm good. It's good to have you back, James. It's really good to have you back. Yeah, you've been away, but you're back with a bang.
I missed one. It's the first ever podcast I wasn't a part of. So yeah, that's I'm looking forward to listening to it, actually, and hearing how Joe got on at London. But on to today, and we're joined by another special guest today. We're on a good string of guests, actually. So today we're joined by the incredible Scott Jenkins. So Scott is a Welsh ultra runner with a long list of running achievements. We just kind of chatted through a bit before we pushed record, but they do include being the first British athlete to complete Tahoe 200, Bigfoot 200, and the Moab 240, so the Triple Crown, as well as a slew of other long distance ultra races that we're going to talk about. Scott's also passionate advocate for a number of charity organisations and does a lot of work to fundraise and raise awareness around a load of worthy causes, which we're going to kind of touch on and chat about as well. So first of all, welcome, Scott. Thanks for joining us.
Guys, thank you so much for having me on. It's a real pleasure to be here. Lovely to chat some British accents. Now I'm based stateside, and excited to dive in and have a good chat to you guys about running. And I think, when you get older in life, getting out and having an adventure and doing some good and trying to raise money is a nice way to look back on things. So that's why I do my ultra running to support a charity called Operation Smile.
Awesome, perfect. Well, yeah, definitely going to ask a load of questions around that. It's nice the range of kind of athletes or distances that people on the call cover, because Lewis was a 1500 runner and you're 250 mile runner, so nice range of backgrounds. But yeah, Scott, what we normally do with guests is, because a lot of our listeners may or may not have heard your story before, you give us a quick kind of roundup of how you got into running, how you found the sport, and some of the motivations behind the stuff that you do.
Yeah, thank you. And by the way, Lewis would absolutely annihilate me in a 1500 mile race for sure. So yeah, I got into running around 2010, where I was chatting. I worked in a gym as a personal trainer, and this guy used to come in every week. His name was Colin. It was in South Wales. It would always be raining. And I'd say, Colin, you always come in. You're like the most positive man in the world. And Colin had a cardiac incident, and he said to me, well, I feel like I had a second chance at life. And it didn't really hit me right there and then, but I kind of thought about it for a few months and thought, actually, what am I doing with my own life that I want to look back on and be proud of? And I'd always been all right at running, and I kind of thought, well, you know what, I'd like to go out and do something, like I just said a minute ago, where I have a bit of an adventure, push myself outside my comfort zone. And I truly believe that's where we grow and develop the most, do something that scares us, excites us a little bit, and try to do some good at the same time. So myself, my brother, our friend Rusty from Texas, we went out to Boston in Massachusetts, and we ran a marathon a day for 75 days from Boston to Austin, Texas, which was 2,000 miles. And what I realized at the end of that adventure, and there's lots of life lessons, I guess, was that the biggest one for me was that the crazier the adventure, the crazier the race, more people would donate to the charity. And fast forward a couple of years, I continued doing my own kind of adventures, and I learned about bad water. I wanted to get into bad water one day, and I decided to go out and run independently across Death Valley with my brother. Not part of the race, just to build that running CV. For a charity called Operation Smile, which does surgical intervention for children with cleft lips, cleft palates all over the world. I think a smile is the universal language of the world. When us boys got together this morning on this podcast, I think first thing you do is smile, right? And to not have the opportunity to do that, I think is so sad. So ran across Death Valley independently, did it twice, and then started entering different ultramarathons, different races over the years, supporting Operation Smile continuously. And then, got into 200 milers in 2019, ran the Moab 240. Obviously, COVID was a bit of an impact, got into bad water, the actual race in 2021, to Cocodona 2022, Bigfoot 2022, 2023. I can't even remember all the races. I went back to run the Triple Crown. And then last year I ran the Dubai 200 and Istria 100 in Croatia. And then this year so far, I have just finished the Arizona Monster 300 mile race down in Arizona about a month ago. So I'm sure I've left some stuff out, but I like the longer stuff.
Yeah, you could say that, Scott. You threw yourself in the deep end as well. What I really like about what you keep saying is the word adventure. You know, James and I, and my partner Gemma and James's partner Nick, we kind of all got into the trail running scene at the same time.
Nice.
And it was very much, or we all described it as almost like a complete change of lifestyle. You know, you change your whole way, and it does become an adventure, and one race can be an adventure, but the adventure continues as well with, you know, continue to look for more races. I mean, when you said, obviously you said you wanted to get out of your comfort zone and do something crazy, and that does always raise a lot of money, and massive well done to you as well, because I know that'll make a big difference to people's lives. But yeah, why did you decide on ultra running? You said you were a runner to start with. Why not just think, oh, well, you know, I'll go and do a number of 5Ks? Why did it have to specifically be those distances?
I just I'd always wanted to do like the marathon distance. The 2,000-mile run, you know, was a little bit unhinged to say the least. You know, it was 0 to 100 real quick. But I just thought, you know, I wanted to do something different and take myself outside of that comfort zone and push myself. And it gave me a great opportunity, I suppose, to really do that. And then subsequently, what I've loved about Boston to Austin is it gave me so many lessons about life, that one of the biggest ones being that when you put the hard work and effort into something, you can achieve anything that you really desire. And it gave me confidence to apply for roles in my, you know, my business life, my professional life as well. But also to this day, like doing these adventures gives me a great perspective on things, when it comes to dealing with, you know, problems in professional or personal life as well. So an example of that being that if I were to go and run a 300-mile race tomorrow, it's going to be a big goal, right? And it's going to take a long time. And there's going to be highs and lows along the way. And you think about, you know, if you're going to win a big account in business, right? I work in medical devices. If you're going to win a big account in business, guess what? It could take you 18 months, and there's going to be highs and lows along the way. And what running has taught me is actually not to get too carried away with the highs or too despondent with the lows, and just kind of putting those problems into perspective. And you can achieve the goal, whether it be running, whether it be business, whatever it is, you can do it with a hard work and effort.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it applies across everything. I think about it a lot with my daughter, or even like my life. You can be kind of raised in a nice place, have it quite easy, enjoy school, have a job that you like and stuff. But you do, just as people, we need to find that kind of challenge and struggle and put ourselves through some adversity and some difficulty. And like a lot of people find that in sport or adventure or whatever you want to call it. And I mean, you've just taken it to seemingly an extreme to the average runner, but also like these super ultras or whatever they're being dubbed as are seeing such massive growth. It's crazy, right?
Yeah.
Like it wasn't that long ago where people would think about a 100-mile race and think that's completely insane. And now, I mean, you can never say that something like UTMB or Western States is par for the course, but it's not that extreme anymore. And you're seeing a lot more of these 100-mile plus races, backyard ultra, multiple lap races, cropping up. And don't get me wrong, you know, you've not got thousands of people at them like you have at a road marathon, but definitely gaining some traction. Have you kind of seen the same thing with like participant numbers and the amount of traction that you've had on media? Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like, you look at the race signups, you know, when I did the Moab 240 in 2019, it wasn't as popular as it is now. Sure, Courtney had done it, but then you look at where it is now, and like it sells out on the day that it opens, or there's a lottery to try and get into the race. You look at Cocodona, which is going on right now. Like they've got a full live streaming the whole thing with commentators. It's amazing to see that growth. And then even, you know, as we just talked about a second ago, the Arizona Monster, you know, first year, inaugural year of a 300-mile foot race, and there was over 300 people that started that race. So the sport, and I think it's really cool, continues to grow, continues to develop, continues to get bigger, and I think that's really exciting because, you know, similarly to me, I want to see more people get out and be active and have these exciting adventures. And I truly believe that we as humans have mistaken comfort for happiness, and we think we're really happy, you know, with the trappings of modern life, and we're sat on the sofa. And don't get me wrong, I like to eat a pizza and sit on the sofa and watch Netflix of a day or an evening. But also, you know, some of my happiest moments are where you start a big race like Badwater, and you've built up to it. You've built up towards this goal, and you're nervous, you're excited, you're outside your comfort zone. And then when you achieve it, that sense of achievement and happiness from achieving that goal, willingly putting yourself in a difficult situation, testing your fortitude, testing resilience, and then achieving it. There's something special about that. And I also believe that, we're not designed for this sedentary lifestyle as humans, right? We were meant to be out, we were meant to be active. So there's something almost primeval about moving through the mountains, seeing the sun go down, seeing the sun come up is very special, and it does tick that adventure box for me for sure.
Yeah, 100%. I'm interested in a little bit around kind of your preparation and training, because just from chatting to you now initially, it feels very much like it is more about the adversity, the experience, the adventure, challenging yourself and putting yourself in a difficult situation. But obviously you can't just rock up and run 240 miles through the desert or whatever. So how do you go about the preparation? Is it a lot more focused on time on feet and building like a robust body so that you can finish? Or are you thinking about times and performance and trying to achieve certain things? Because I mean, me and Lewis just recently watched the Max Joliffe little YouTube documentary with King of Moab. We did the Moab 240, like pretty cool YouTube video. And obviously he's there trying to win the race and whatever. And he goes out at what for him looks like a jog, and by halfway he is like stumbling, tripping, walking. How do you pace a 240-mile race? Like, we had this chat and we're like, you may as well just start power hiking from the start line.
It's an interesting one. I think I'll answer the first part first. So the training side of things. I mean, I'm very fortunate. I'm coached by an amazing ultra runner. I'm sure you guys know him, Jeff Browning. He's got the second most wins of all time for 100-mile races. He's in his mid-50s, and he's still winning pretty much every race that he enters. Like, there's a great documentary actually on Cocodona called The Chase, which is on YouTube now. Phenomenal, definitely worth watching. Our Raffia have made that documentary. But Jeff schedules all of my training for me, which is awesome, because trying to find the time to schedule it all myself when I've got a busy work life would be challenging. So I tend to do my longer runs on the weekend. I do tempo fast runs, I do sprint work, I do sled pulls, I do weighted hill runs, I do all kinds of different things that I think replicate as closely as possible to being in a 200-mile race. So yes, there's an element, maybe the sprints don't, but I need to do some speed work to try and be as efficient as possible, I suppose you would say. But also, like, one of the runs that I and Jeff came up with for this race was that there's a hill at the bottom of our street, and it goes up and over, and it's about a mile out, mile back. And then there's another one off to the side going east and west. So basically, I do this crossroads back and forth across this hill with a 60-pound essentially weight on my back. So I've got a 40-pound weighted vest, and then I fully loaded my running pack as well, so that I could make it way heavier than anything that I would encounter during the race itself. So my pack during the race was 20 pounds, but I'd done training runs with 60 pounds on my back. So I knew that I'd be able to carry 4 liters of water effectively and efficiently. And then to answer the second part of the question, like, running a 300-mile race was completely unknown. I'd done 200s before. 300s was a different ball game. We talked about it in detail. It was quite funny, actually, because me and my wife, my wife pace me. She crews me at all of these big races. Abby is incredible. She's been to all these big races and has so much experience. And she likes to see me trying my best and trying as much as I can to be competitive. And we started the race, and my plan was go out very conservatively. To your point, what's the point in running up the first couple of hills in the first 6 miles? There's no point at all, because you can go out and be really fast, but it actually comes down to this resilience, the fortitude, what's going on in here. By night 3, by night 4, not everyone wants to go out into the mountains in the cold, dark nights and keep pushing forward. And that's where, I'm not a typical runner in terms of being like a smaller, I could be a bit skinnier, let's be honest, but I love strength and conditioning. And actually what helps me to be competitive is that that mindset piece for sure. But then, during the race itself, it was like, go out conservatively. It's going to be really hot. It's the desert. I'm a pasty Welshman. I have no business in being in the desert in the first place. So we were very conservative. And then, as the race wore on, things like your aid stations become crucial. They become like, I'm not an F1 car either by any stretch, but they become very like F1 pit stops, right? You're coming in, you're fueling, you're making sure the shoes are good, the socks are good, the feet are clean, and then you're out again and your crew are putting you back together. And then, you're just thinking about each section as it comes, moving through it as effectively as possible, and working my way through the leaderboard, almost like the tortoise and the hare, I suppose, a little bit from my perspective.
Well, it's a bit like your analogy though, Scott. You said about, life's about these ups and downs, but not riding them too high and not too low. Like we talk a lot about that with the athletes that I coach. I'm almost telling them, look, we want to be steady away. We don't want these surges up the hills, or certainly surges down, because they're the ones that are going to do the damage. So actually, the more we can keep it in line, it goes back to that analogy you've already made. But I'm going to ask you a question, because it's the question I get asked the most as a coach from any ultra runner that particularly is going to go kind of beyond 100 miles, but even with the kind of 100K, 100 milers as well, is they say, how do you prepare mentally for it? How do you get yourself in a mindset that you're going to be able to deal with it? And you said that's would you say that's one of your strengths, the mindset side?
I think so. I would say so, yeah.
So do you prepare mentally? And if you do, what kind of strategies do you have? Or actually, do you just enjoy figuring it out when you're out there?
I do prepare mentally, actually, and I do try to look for opportunities in my training runs to make them harder than what I think I will encounter on the course. So one of the things I left out of my weighted hill vest session was that what I would do is that I do the 4 east, west, north, south on the hill with the weighted vest on, with my running pack on. Then I would come back, turn my garage into a gym. I'd take it all off. I'd do a set of like 20 squats, 20 deadlifts, 20 wall balls, and then I'd put it all back on, and then I'd go back out again. And I knew that that would help build some mental calluses, because I was like, this is worse than anything I'm going to encounter. Yes, I'll be hiking up some really steep hills, but there'll be beautiful views. This is going to suck way more. So I feel like if you can find those opportunities to suffer more in training, when it comes to the actual race, you can enjoy it a little bit more, perhaps. And one of the other things that I do is I kind of came up with it with Jeff when I was living in London. I didn't have the opportunity to be in the mountains to compete against mountain runners all the time. So what I would do is weighted vest box steps, and I'd do 100 weighted box steps with the weighted vest on. And then I'd get back on the treadmill and run. I'd get off and do it again. And we'd do sets of that kind of thing, because I knew doing those box steps would be a bigger step than anything that I would encounter in the mountains. And then I did that for my training program for the Divide 200, which is a mountain in the Canadian a race in the Canadian Rockies, 47,000 feet of elevation gain up and down. And that helped me to be competitive. When it came to being in the Rockies, I was like, yeah, this is really hard, but it's also beautiful, and it's better than looking at the wall doing box steps. So that's how I've learned to do it. Mental calluses, for sure.
That for me is really interesting, because, and I think this is where athletes who understand themselves and the coach who understand the athlete, this is really important, because sometimes you see like research and literature, and they'll say, well, there isn't, a huge amount of, benefit from doing that. But actually what you're saying here is, well, I'm getting the training benefit, but I know what I need. And I know that that's going to help me mentally, which I'm going to need in the race. So the literature might say, oh, well, there's mixed evidence on doing box steps with a weighted vest. Yeah, it's get some strength, but then to run after it. But research can't measure the mental side. And it can only measure kind of like that physical response. But you're saying I was doing this for a mental response. And that's really clever, because it's like brain training, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And like that helped me to be really competitive in that race. I came from sea level, and it's not bigging myself up in any way, but like I finished 14th in a Rocky Mountain race, like over 200 miles. And to me, that's evidence enough. Anecdotal may it be, but like that it actually worked. The other one that I was doing, and I just remember specifically at the time, is that this has to pay off because it sucked so much. Was that I was on the eastern section of the hill, and it was minus 22 in New Jersey in January, and I was doing these runs toward in the evening. It was dark, and there was snowbank on left hand side. And I like to run towards the traffic just so I can see what's going to finish me, right? And I was literally dodging in and out of these snowbanks and dodging pickup trucks coming towards me. And I'm thinking, God damn, like this has to pay off because I can't feel my face. I can't feel anything. I'm trying to avoid getting run over and slipping in the snow at the same time. So it definitely paid off for the monster. That's for sure.
I think this is be relatable for anybody, no matter what type of event or even sport that they're training for. But I can relate to everything you're saying. I don't run for anywhere near as long and don't do as long distances, but I have the exact same mindset with if things can be more difficult, more challenging in training. If you're running into the wind, you could be annoyed because you can't hold the pace that you wanted for the rep in your session, or you could think, well, it's not going to be this windy in the race, so all this is doing is making it feel easier on the day. Or every little opportunity you get to kind of mentally prepare in that way during training, so the race is the reward. It's the only way to do it, really.
Definitely. And do you know what's really funny is that when you're out there running, you're like, oh god damn, it's so cold, like this has to pay off. And then the moment I go down to run in the desert in Arizona, I'm like, oh, it's so hot, I wish it was cold like New Jersey again. I think the truth is the porridge is never quite right.
Well, and that sort of brings me on to the next question, because you're right, there's so many different factors with these races. So we've focused a lot on the distance, right, which is that's the big headline. You see these numbers, 200, 240, 300 miles, and that is just sort of spectacular. It grabs your attention. But we know all the other bits that go into these sorts of races: elevation, altitude, temperature, conditions, fueling, sleep, whatever. There's a million factors. I guess it might be difficult because you've done so many of them, but is there a particular race that stands out as being specifically challenging for you on the day, and why was that? Was it a particularly hot race? Was it a cold race at elevation? Was it mountainous? Was it flat? Even a couple of them. I imagine they're all pretty hard, but
they're all hard in different ways. And thanks for asking that question. Bad water's tough because you're on the road and it's so hot. It's 52 degrees Celsius. But I think actually the hardest race I've done is probably the Divide 200 in Canada. Consistently kind of think about this, and people do ask it, like, what's the most difficult race you've done? And that one kind of it's a newer race. They've only done it for 2 years. It goes under the radar, but there's the climbs there are straight up. It's 47,000 feet up and down, and there's no switchbacks anywhere. Canadians don't do switchbacks. Very similar to the Europeans. It's just up, and that's it, and down. And it was not only physically demanding, but the weather there was pretty gnarly. It rained the whole time, which is quite similar to being in Wales. So it wasn't too much of a big deal. But then to the point earlier around the mindset, there's something to be said when you're in the middle of nowhere on a Canadian mountain and it's the middle of the night, the rain's coming in, and you can hear packs of wolves howling. I mean, that's the kind of thing that not every runner really wants to go out and push in those conditions. And it was quite alarming knowing that there's apex predators out there. And you're thinking, just keep my head down, keep running. And actually during the race, on the third day of the race, I ran past this really remote lake called Window Mirror Lake, and it was beautiful, but I was terrified. And the reason I was terrified was there was these big piles of grizzly bear scat, absolutely enormous, and I'm making all this noise trying to do what I've seen Bear Grylls do, make as much noise as possible. And I finished the race, and my wife said to me, "You're going to do that race again?" I was like, well, probably not. It was a very challenging race, but you never say never. Never say never. And she's like, well, just to let you know, there was a hiker that went past Window Mirror Lake 4 hours after you, and she showed me the news article, and that grizzly bear, managed to get hold of that hiker. It was pretty terrifying in all fairness. And you're thinking, that is it's a different level of race being in those kind of environments. Certainly coming from Wales and London, where probably the most dangerous things are cows, right, or sheep.
Yeah, it's freaky, isn't it? I lived in
Yeah.
Canada for a number of years, and there weren't as many grizzlies on the west coast where we were, although there were some, but it was a lot more black bears. But it's freakish. You know, you want to be out on the trails first thing in the morning, but every time you're the first person on that trail that day, you are just waiting to come around the corner, startle a mother bear who's with a cub, and get killed. And it's like a weird external factor that you don't normally think about, but and one of the factors that I hadn't even mentioned in that long list of attributes that make races difficult. But that's super interesting. I mean, I can only imagine how stunning parts of that course must have been, because I think the Canadian Rockies are some of the most beautiful mountains I've ever been in.
And I think you make a really good point there as well. Like, that's one of the appeals, right? Is accessing these places that you could only get to by foot, and creating those seminal moments and memories that will last a lifetime in your head, right? To your point, I was running the Tahoe 200 as part of the Triple Crown. I was coming up the trail, and I encountered a brown bear, no, black bear, sorry, with its two cubs. I had a pacer with me at the time, and we both kind of stopped and we're like, we're in a standoff with a bear and his two cubs. It was the most surreal thing. And it looked at me, I looked at it, it looked at me, I looked at it. And then it kind of took a sniff of the air, and I think it got wafted of my running kit, because it took off pretty sharpish. I'm like, you're lucky, pal. Well, next time.
With all this talk about bears, it reminds me, I was part of a marathon challenge. I wasn't running, I ran parts of it, but I was coaching and supporting a group who did 5 marathons in 5 days in 5 global cities. And one of the places that they flew to was Alaska. And I always remember getting the bear spray out, and we had to put bear spray on. But by the end of that, one of the guys was starting to struggle a little bit, and he started hallucinating during the run, and he thought a bear was eating a car, and then he came back and he was adamant there was this bear, and he was running in and he was panicking, and he was saying there's a bear eating a car around there, and we're like, there definitely isn't. But that's all part and parcel of it as well, Scott, is like, you have to deal with things like hallucinations and the mind shutting down on you. And that quite often people say, oh, the mind will go before the body will. And this is really true with kind of these long ultras where you're sleep deprived. I'm sure you've experienced some of that.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, there was one occasion in Moab in Utah where I was convinced I was being chased by a witch, and that was in the Moab 240, and I ran away and I hid under a rock, and I could hear the witch coming in, and she's saying, Scott, where are you? I did the only thing that you could do in that situation, chaps, which was to pull out the crucifix, which is internationally recognized to ward off vampires and, of course, witches. It's probably in the literature somewhere. And as I hid under that rock, kind of warding her off, she stuck her head under the rock in this broad Scottish accent and said, "Get out, it's me, your bloody wife, not the witch." I was convinced that she was a witch. So the moral of that story is, don't call your wife a witch, chaps, would be it. But in the Monster 300, like, I didn't really experience any hallucinations. The only thing I mistook, I was running with a lovely guy from England, Ben Potter. The only thing I mistook was a rolled up cactus for being an anaconda. And I kind of went, oh God, there's an anaconda. He's like, no, mate, it's a cactus. What are you doing? So there was that. And then I think, just to your point about the hallucinations, I think sleep is a massive part of the strategy in these 200 milers. Like, it can make or break your event, and I've certainly had it break my event in 2019 when I ran Moab for the first time with the witch story. Went from 15th to 35th, and by the same token, in the last race at the Monster, I got it absolutely perfect for the first time, and it was a big part of helping me finish in the top 10 and getting into 9th spot. So I think sleep and banking it on the first night is very, very important, because that way, after you go through the first night, your body's not like, oh, I've missed a night's sleep. Actually, you've got some sleep and you've tricked it into thinking it's had a rest. And then, you can go about your strategy for the rest of the race, I suppose.
Yeah, so maybe go into that in a little bit more detail, Scott, around like how it went wrong and what were the mistakes you made? How did you learn from that? And then, what have you found is the best strategy for you? I know everyone's different, but I think people will find this really interesting, that word banking the sleep, because I think a lot of people don't do that. They think I'm going to run through, and I've got a similar mindset to you. I've not coached many who do these multi-stages, but I'm like, no, try and get it in early, if anything. So what's your kind of go-to now?
Yep. So hands up, got it wrong spectacularly in Moab in 2019. As I mentioned, got chased by a witch. It was bloody terrifying. I thought to myself, I don't want to do that again. So I've never been chased by her since, unless it's at home, chasing me around the house, trying to get me to do stuff. But I quickly learned that obviously sleep is going to be a big part of these 200-mile races. Then I experimented with like, okay, so should I try to do like 2 hours a night? Should I do an hour a night? What's going to work? I started getting towards an hour a night, but what I continued to do was push through the first night. And what I kind of learned was no matter, even if I did an hour a night, eventually towards the back end of the race, it would catch up to me. So last year in the divide, even though I managed to kind of get in 14th, it was a case of like the sleep wasn't perfect. So I spent 6 hours of the very last afternoon in this heightened sense of paranoia and deja vu on a remote side mountains in the Rocky Mountains. And you're just like, I was convinced I'd been there before, and I knew come the end of the race, yeah, it was a decent result, but like I knew I hadn't got it perfect. So going into the monster, me and my coach Jeff, we talked about it at length. As like, no matter how good you feel, you will sleep on that first night. And he kept drilling me on it, drilling me on it. It's like you have to sleep on that first night. If you do it, I'm
Interesting.
telling you, you can lock it in. And on the first night, same thing, right? I'm feeling good. I'm watching runners, like, and I'm thinking, I could just push on. I feel all right. I'm not really tired, but I did actually take the time to lay down and sleep for 20 minutes earlier in the evening, and I did a little bit longer, another 20 minutes, kind of just before dawn. And I found that actually that was enough. Probably could have been a little bit longer, but it was chilly out on the trail, and I was sleeping on the floor. That was enough for the first night to make me feel pretty refreshed. Then the second day came, it was really hot, but I didn't feel tired at all. And then I continued in that vein for the rest of the race. So I did another 20-minute nap on the last night, just on the side of the trail, because again I was cold and tired. But the rest of the nights I did an hour, and that was enough for me. And I think, to your point, banking it earlier in the race pays off later in the race for sure, because your average pace just drops so much when you're tired, and the sleep makes such a difference in resetting it. I could see it in my data. I've just never been able to execute it because you get caught up in the excitement of the race, and actually having the discipline to do that is important. And also, I think the true learning from failure is it's okay to just talk about it, but can you have the kind of courage to alter your course of action when you're later faced with the same circumstances to try to achieve a positive outcome? And finally, I've listened to my own advice, and it paid off at the monster, so that was good.
I mean, it's easier said than done. As you're saying that, the first thing that comes to my mind is how people deal with injuries a lot of the time. You're training a lot, you've got a little niggle. It'd probably be fine. I'll do one more run, turns into an injury. And then 2 months later, you do the same thing, turns into an injury. And at some point, you realize, I've got a bit of a niggle. Maybe I'll take a day off. And just learning from those prior mistakes and actually applying those learnings is difficult. But I do think that's where having a coach comes in as well, massively. And it sounds like you have that relationship with Jeff, and that's how me and Lewis kind of work together, because it's like a bit of an accountability partner, really, isn't it? You're not going to go do too much, you're not going to do too little, and when you're checking in, I'm sure you guys are speaking on a daily, weekly basis. It's just someone else who understands where you're at and has probably made a lot of the mistakes that you're going to make and can catch it before you do.
Definitely, and Jeff and my wife Abby definitely hold me to account, and I think that a good thing for coaches and their athletes is to, as you said earlier, Lewis, really understand that athlete. And the great thing for me working with Jeff is that he understands that my life outside of running is really, really busy. I travel a lot for work. It's a big role, and it's it's very, very busy. So he understands that, some weeks it's not going to be perfect, but as long as we get those long runs in, we get the sessions that I can't miss, the strength and conditioning sessions in, the hill session in. He's happy with that, and I'm happy with that, because I know that when the opportunity comes and it's a less busy week, I will put that extra work in, and we understand that. And having that flexibility is super important to me as well, because it, the stresses of modern life, can impact your training. They can impact you negatively, and you think, you see somebody's doing X, Y, Z on Instagram, or they're doing this, they're doing that, and actually just understanding that we all live different lives, and we all have different pressures and stresses and things to burden on our shoulders, and actually understanding the athlete and those pressures can really help to make sure that you're maximizing your productivity. I believe anyway.
Yeah, 100%, absolutely. And it was actually going to be my next question was around. It sounds like you got a very busy job, and obviously you need to do a lot of training to prepare your body for these races, and you actually seem to do them pretty regularly, relative for the distance and the amount of time I would imagine it takes to recover. So I was just interested in, because I do think people listening would like to know as well, what the volume of training on a kind of weekly or monthly basis looks like, and how you do fit that around travel and work. Because I have a similar situation. Like, I got a busy job. I love my job, but I travel a lot with work. And it's challenging to fit it in around family. And I imagine volume wise, you're probably doing, well, actually, I don't know. What's your weekly volume like in a big week leading up to these events?
I'll do a 1 week where it'll be like 100-mile week, or like 90 to 100-mile week.
Okay.
I do my longer runs on the weekend, so it might be like a 20-mile on Saturday, might be like a 10 or 15 on Sunday, depending. Sometimes we do it on time on feet as well, just to kind of make it a little bit more interesting for me. When I travel, I always try to make the most of, like, I went to San Francisco earlier this year for a work meeting, which really exciting, but like, you're indoors all day, and actually taking the time to go out and run and see the city is quite nice. Yeah, it might not be my most productive training run, but I always make the effort to get some time outside and running. And then I always look for hotels as well that have got gyms to be able to train in, because I think that's super important. And that's probably one thing that we haven't really touched on too much, is like the strength and conditioning element. I truly believe, like, and touch wood, I've been all right on the injury front. I had some bursitis on my hip a couple of years ago, but like, strength and conditioning for me as a runner, as I've got older, is it's always been something I've enjoyed, but now I really see the importance of it to longevity in running these long distances. And Jeff is a perfect example of somebody like that, super fit athlete. And it's like, well, okay, he's clearly doing something right. I think the one thing, actually, it's not one thing, is it? And you two, with your background as coaches and runners, like, I think marginal gains are really, really important in this. And I'm not on about the old, paper bag that may be delivered to the cycling squad. I'm on about, actually marginal gains of, like, can I improve my sleep by 0.5%? Can I improve, my running uphill by 0.5%? Can I improve my hydration, my nutrition, all of those things? And then all of a sudden you've got a 10% improvement. And that's something that we work on together, me and Jeff, and something that, again, it paid off in the Monster for sure. Because, like, it's such a big race, 300 miles. And actually I got to mile 205 and I couldn't believe it. I looked down my watch and I'd run 205 miles in 69 hours. My previous best for a 200-mile race was like 77 for 240 in Moab in
Wow.
2021. But normally I'm in that kind of late 70s to 80 ballpark for 200 miles. But in a 300-mile race, I set a PB for 200 miles, which still blows my mind. And it says to me that actually a lot of the training we did, a lot of looking into those little incremental gains really paid off. Even like the water bottles. So I went for like a water bottle specifically for this race that were 2 800 ml flasks up front, because I realized that actually I needed more fluid. I'm a heavy sweater, being in the desert, like I say, pasty Welshman, I'm going to go up in flames. So I need as much fluid as I possibly can. A lot of those sections, 22-mile sections, 7,000 foot again, I need 4 liters of water because there's nothing on the course. So it's like, okay, if I've got 2 800s there, how am I going to get the rest into the back of my pack? Don't like a bladder because I think it can unbalance your electrolyte mix massively. And that's another thing we'll talk about in a second. But like, I knew that I could fit 2 more 800s and a bottle of maybe Gatorade or a bottle of something nice in the back, but which would give me my 4 liters. So we looked at everything in that kind of level of detail. And just coming back to the water electrolyte sodium balance, like we looked at like, okay, I'm going to carry a scratch there. I'm going to carry a water there. It's something that Jeff's taught me again. I sip from one, I always sip from the other. So I keep that balance. And again, I did the math on adjusting from a 500 ml flask to an 800 ml flask and what that meant in terms of levels of sodium content. So like I say, heavy sweater, in a liter of sweat, I lose about 1200 milligrams of sodium. So I knew that actually for an 800 ml flask, I'm going to have to bash in about 1600 milligrams of sodium on top of the scratch. So it was literally like my scratch drink, 3 scoops of scratch, and then 2 S-cap tabs. And that got me to like just under 1600. I knew that that was a perfect balance. So that was the kind of level of preparation we were going into.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's so different with the longer stuff because all these factors make such a bigger difference. Like you can maybe get away with a few swigs of water in a road marathon and finishing a bit dehydrated, and maybe that's okay because you're only out there for 2 to 3 hours or whatever. Even in like an ultra distance race, you can get away with pushing it a little bit. And I tend to err on the lower side, I suppose, with the fluid and hydration for various different reasons. And due to the length of the races and conditions obviously dependent, sometimes that makes sense. But when you're out there for multiple days, you're just not getting away with it. Like the care in terms of hydration, electrolyte levels, fueling, sleep, even just like foot care and stuff, I would imagine, and blisters and shoes and socks and whatever, plays such a bigger part. Because if you get one of those things wrong 24 hours in, you've got another 2 days of suffering through it. It's like a different sport. It really is like a different sport.
It's really interesting. I think strategy is a big part of it. Pre-planning, making sure that your logistics are spot on is so important. Like even with my nutrition bags, like I spent 3 nights because it's like, I think it was 19 aid stations across
That's
the
so
300
ridiculous.
which is crazy. I mean, it's literally, guys, it took me 3 nights of like prepping the scratch, like scoop after scoop, and then trying to get my poor wife Abby, the witch, get involved with putting the salt tabs in and breaking up all of the salt tabs. And then my food bags were separate to that. So like every food bag for every aid station had enough food for every section of that race. And I planned it meticulously. I went over it like 3 times. I'm like, okay, so we've got enough calories, we've got enough gels. I use an optimized fat metabolizing agent called Vespa, which is designed to use fat as a fuel source, which I know that I can carry less calories by having that in my food pack. So I had like 2 or 3 of those in my bag. I had my enough gels for each section. I had a couple of like gummies, like Jelly Babies or Haribo, and then a handful of like plantain chips or crisps just to mix it up. And then I'd make sure I have enough of those for every section of the race. So
Do you worry about protein intake at all for that length of race?
I
Like
do,
during the race?
yeah, absolutely. So I drink the protein when I come to the aid stations. So they do
Okay.
these shakes out here that have like 42 grams of protein in them. Perfect. So like, I come into the aid station and knock one of those back, and then go tear into a burger or something like that. That's the other thing with these longer distances. One thing that was awesome in this race, there's I'm sure you've just been to California yourself, so they have In-N-Out Burger over there, and one
Oh
of the
yeah.
aid stations was right next to this In-N-Out Burger, and there's a great photo one of my crew took of me, and there's like this drive-through. So there's all these cars lined up at the drive-through. There's me sat on the floor, and in one hand I've got this pin because nobody wants to pop the blisters on my feet, and I'm getting ready to pop the blisters. And in the other hand I've got this burger that I'm trying to eat from In-N-Out Burger, and then I've got like a milkshake straight after that. And yeah, just getting those calories in is so important. And actually, one thing for the hot races that I found amazing for aid stations, if you've got a crew, is ice cream. So
Right.
calorific and really cold. And
Yeah.
obviously, when you're in those hot races, if you can keep your guts and your digestive system a bit cooler, then you can get the calories in that you need to be going these long distances, I suppose.
It's really interesting, Scott, and yeah, I mean, I know we're gonna run out of time. We could talk about this all day, and like
It's
I
great
guess
to
that's the
chat
beauty
about
of
it.
the longer races. It's just so much to talk about. But one message I kind of want to get across to our listeners is back to your S&C point and your sleep. And I agree. I think it's so important, and I also think it's so important for long-term health as well as if people want to continue to do this later in life. I think it's becoming. It's becoming more topical, that's for sure, and people are discussing it more, which is really good. But a lot of the stuff you spoke about, I know the preparation is all about calculation, but a lot of the stuff you spoke about is the basics. Like you said, there were 1%ers and they all add up. And I think sometimes the confusion comes. People think these 1%ers are like products they can buy or quick fixes. And actually, what you were saying was it's the nutrition, it's the sleep, it's the S&C, and like these are all things that people can do. They just don't spend enough time thinking about them. And it sounds like you have dialed in on those, and it's made such a difference.
Thanks for saying that, Lewis. I really appreciate it. And it's something that I specifically tried to do, right? Because I know that if I can have everything, just as the food example is a great one, right? If I've got everything in a bag when I come into an aid station, that means I'm not looking for anything. My crew aren't going, what you want to eat, what you need. Like, they know that when I come in, I'm going to want a protein shake, maybe a milkshake, a burger, something like that. I even record it on a voice note when I come in so that I can just say, hey, this is kind of what I want. It's a bit deeperish, that, but sometimes record it if I can be bothered, and say like, this is what I want. But I know that like my food pack is ready to go, so I can just grab that Ziploc as soon as I've eaten whatever's available at the aid station and drunk whatever I want. I can be out of there in like under 5 minutes in, a 200-mile race is pretty effective. And, you can easily, and you guys know this, you've been in the game long enough, like you can lose 20, 30 minutes in an aid station like that. And you multiply that across 19, all of a sudden, the time benefits that you can get just through being effective at an aid station far outweigh, try to think about like taking 4 or 5 hours off your time just purely through running alone. It's going to be not on impossible, but through logistics, you can do it. And I think, it's easy to do those things whilst you're fresh in the benefit of your own home. You've got everything you need. It's another thing to be doing it in the dark on the side of a 9,000-foot mountain in the cold. It's going to take all night. So yeah, that's why I do those things.
Nice, cool. I mean, the experience must just stack as well. Like the more of these things that you do, there's probably not that many people that have done this number of 200 plus mile races. You're probably up there in the top percentile of people just in terms of pure race experience in these distances. You've obviously learned a lot from it, and it's really cool to hear that it's come together in the most recent race, and it's gone so well. So I want to finish off with two questions, Scott, because I know we've only got a few minutes left. Firstly, what does the recovery look like after running 300 miles? And then off the back of that, we have to kind of ask, what's next? It's cliched, but you know what it's like. I'm sure you were Googling races the day after you finished. So we're all sick in the head, right?
We're all sick in the head. We can't get more. It's like Stockholm syndrome. We just want to go back for more. Yeah. It's so true, right? The recovery is an interesting one, right? I mean, I like to finish the race immediately and have a ice cold beer and a slice of pizza and just enjoy that, which is exactly what I did at the Monster. Then it was a bit of a rush. We actually went up to Phoenix, flew back to the UK, went to a wedding in Wales, came back to New Jersey, and then straight back into work. But I think the recovery, like physically and mentally, takes about 4 to 6 weeks to get over a 200. Okay. Probably similar for a 300-mile race. But trying to get lots of high protein back into my diet, just trying to mobilize. I'm back in the gym. I ran this morning, only 30 minutes, but just building it back up again. Because I think you need that mental break as much as anything else as well. So yeah, back at it now. I'm keen to not eat too much dairy milk, which I smuggled back from the UK. I think I've had my fill. And then in terms of what's next, I think one of the things that I really wanted to do after this race, and I'm terrible for doing it, is just not basking in it, but just enjoying the moment, put all that work in, run 300 miles, finish in ninth, and like something that I've wanted to do for 15 years, like to make it into the top 10 of a big international race, to finally do that. I think I owed it to myself to just sit on the sofa, look at some photos, have a little glass of whiskey, and enjoy that moment, if nothing else. And then, as you rightly said, slightly sick in the head, slightly unhinged. I'm already looking for that next thing. I think I'm going to jump into a 200 miler in July in Colorado called the Summit 200. That one's kind of piqued my interest. And then I already know next year I want to do a double. So I want to do Cocodona and I want to do Moab next year, because I've run both those races. I've run Cocodona once before in 2022. And I've run Moab 3 times, which is my favorite race. And, now I'm already thinking, I'm like, well, if you can get to ninth, then, maybe you can get to top 5, maybe you can get to the podium. What else can I improve? What other marginal gains are there to try and take things forward? So we'll see how we get on, but I'm certainly not done yet. Fingers crossed.
Yeah, it's super exciting. I hate even asking the question, but you've got to ask it. But you're right. I think sitting back and enjoying it, especially that scale of achievement and the amount of training, the length of the race and the time it takes to recover is very important and difficult to do. I struggle with that. But like you say, you've always got one eye on what's coming next, right? Because you love it. Otherwise you wouldn't be doing it.
Absolutely. It's
awesome.
good as well. Because like we said right at the beginning, you do grow and develop when you do these things. You learn something every time about yourself. And it's being outside of that comfort zone that really excites me. And I'm going to continue to look for those opportunities, as I'm sure you guys are. And it goes without saying, if you ever find yourself on the East Coast of the US, please look me up and we'll go for a run.
Nice. Well, we might both be out in November. You never know. I'll drag him out with me. Did you want to give a quick shout out to any of the organizations that you're working with, Scott? I know you mentioned Operation Smile. Like, if the listeners wanted to go and find out about them, just Google it or anything particular?
Yeah, I'd like to give a shout out, and thank you for reminding me, James. I appreciate that. So the first thing I'd like to do is I'd like to give a shout out to Destination Trail, who put on the 300-mile race. They did a fantastic job in the inaugural year of a 300-mile race, and I had a fantastic adventure. The second thing I'd really like to do is thank my crew, Jacob Cooper, Tina Ormuse, and my long-suffering wife, Abby Fleming, for all the support and love they showed me during that race. I couldn't have done it without them, and the buckle is for them as much as anyone else. And then the third thing I'd like to do is that if anyone wants to learn about Operation Smile, it's a wonderful charity. As I say, Smile's the universal language of the world. They do so much great work. You can go to their website, check it out. Please do. And if you're really bored at the end of all that list, then I put all my adventures on Instagram at Scott J. Jenkins. So feel free to cure your narcolepsy by following my content.
Look at that. Professionally done, hey? Amazing. Thank you. Really appreciate your time, Scott. And amazing story. Looking forward to following you and hopefully meeting up in person for a run at some point, as long as it's like, something reasonable.
As long as there's pizza and beer at the end, I look forward to it.
Yeah, I'm sure we can work something out. Awesome. All right. Well, thanks a lot, mate. Great to meet you, and lovely chat. And Lewis, as always, thanks for your time. Pleasure to have you back on.
Thanks, James. Yeah, appreciate that, Scott. And yeah, just I guess a final message from me. Like, it's great to hear your story, but it's great to hear how you share it with people, and also you have a bigger why behind it. And I think that's always powerful, especially when you go into these races. Bigger why always means more. There's more on the line, and people are more invested. So yeah, it's great to hear how you've done that with a team. And yeah, fair play for giving them all a shout out as well. And hopefully we'll get a run in soon. But yeah, not too far, like James said. We'll cap it at 20 minutes maybe.
Thanks for the kind words, chaps. It's lovely to meet you both, and hopefully see you soon.
Awesome. Cool. All right, everyone. Hopefully you've enjoyed that episode. Obviously, catch up with us in a couple of weeks when we have the next podcast coming out. I know we've got some exciting guests lined up over the coming months. So, yeah, lots to come. And thanks again, Scott. Take care, everyone. Speak soon.